Thank you, Patrick. So I sent in a list to the chat if everyone can look, and then to all our committee members and developers and architects. And Marty, if you're able to look at the Q&A here, you can see some folks put in their full question. You can read ahead of time, or some folks just said they have a question. Everyone will have the opportunity to ask. So first we'll have Chetan Chandra, and sorry if I am pronouncing your name wrong, but please introduce yourself and where you live. I'm promoting you, and once I click promote, they'll come up as video and you'll be able to speak. So Chetan, please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Is it possible to request that people who are asking questions turn their video on if they have the equipment to do so?
Yes, absolutely. If they are comfortable and have the equipment, we'd love to see your faces.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you all hear me? I'll just get this video going.
No problem. Thank you. Yes.
I thought we weren't using them. Let me just get it together real quick.
Let me just say, while he figures out getting his video on screen, I just wanted to say to the committee members that this is the letter that I forwarded to you like 2 days ago that he sent to me, that I want to give him props for taking the time to really write all this out, because it really did have a good explanation of all of his issues, and he needs to be thanked for at least taking the time and doing this, because most people don't do as efficient a job of explaining this type of stuff to make the committee understand what's going on.
Yeah, I second that. Thank you very much to you and your collaborator.
Yeah, thank you so much. The collaborator was my wife, and the neighbors helped us out too. So, you know, it's not easy to take time from our day jobs that are also busy to do this. But so thank you for recognizing me. I appreciate that. So first off, you know, my name is Chetan Chandra. I am the owner with my wife Megan, 417 T Street, which is the immediately adjacent house, and we're the only adjacent house on T Street. All the other properties that abut the subject property, you know, have their rear yards connected to it. So we're within, I think, 4.5 feet of the side of their house. So I have 2 comments, and I'm going to refer to some renderings I made, and you might have seen in the letter. And then I have a question more to the history that I think Bill weighed on a little bit. So I first want to say, you know, I feel like there has been a lack of community outreach by the developer. You know, they haven't reached out to us one time to say, hey, here's what we're thinking of doing. You know, do you have any input at all, whether it's negative or positive? And this is, you know, even after the fact that Chris has my phone number. I went over there and told them about a break-in and tried to be a good neighbor, and they haven't reached out to us. So I feel like we're in the dark a little bit, metaphorically, and we might be literally. So because of the shadow study, as you can see. So I have some renderings I put together. I think I sent them to Amanda. If she has them, she can share them, or I can share them if it's necessary. Do you have them, Amanda?
Yeah, I can share them if you think that's the best.
Yeah, I think that's the best way.
With the petition and the map of the.
Sure. I mean, I'm just going to refer to the photos and the comparisons that I put together.
Talking about, Amanda, the letter that he sent has some renderings with photos of rear yard and stuff. Do you have that?
I'm not sure if I got the renderings, but if you have them up on your computer, I allowed you to share.
Okay, I'll pull it up right now.
Sorry, I thought I sent you that.
No problem.
All right, share screen. How do I do this? Screen.
That green button, there you go. Choose, you got it. Look at you go.
All right, let's take a look. Okay, so, you know, the architectural drawings were pretty, they were beautiful, right, as they normally are. I'm gonna try to zoom out a little bit so y'all can see. But I put these together actually based on those architectural drawings. I took the actual images that they had in their application, added the red brick to match the other property, and wanted to give people, you know, like a realistic view of what this is going to look like and how it'll impact, specifically me and my wife and, our enjoyment of our rear yard. So I went out and measured that fire post over here is 29 feet from the rear of their existing property. So that's where, you can see I tried to stop the superimposed part here at 29 feet and estimated based on the second floors where they are currently, and this is 6 feet. So I tried to be as accurate as possible. I'm sure I'm not a professional at this, so I'm sure there's some small inaccuracies, but so this is, just to show we have a small rear yard and it's essentially our rear space. We do park there. Sometimes when we have friends over and the weather's nice, we have like a table and chairs and we try to go out and hang out. And this is the only window we have at the back of our house. So you can see that the addition they're proposing will occlude, about half of the open air feeling that we can see from our rear house. This is a view from the alleyway. And you can see we touched on it a little bit before, but there are people who park in the alley lot that is behind 406U. So it would just, this alley is very narrow and there are at least 6 or 7 cars that go in and out currently to add trash pickup and, at least 5 more parking spots for cars, I feel like would be difficult. But as you can see, it's a pretty large addition. In my mind, it kind of destroys the open feeling of the alleyway that we just moved into. I mean, we moved here just over a year ago because of the open feeling of the neighborhood and just the privateness of the alleyway. There's another rendering of what it would look like. And this was even a panoramic view because I felt like just taking a shot without the panorama wasn't fair. So I tried to give a broader view that was closer to like matching your eye. This is from the northwest corner of the parking area. And, I'll go through quickly the rest of them. And this is what it would look like from the rear window of 406U. So as you can see, it's going to be a very large addition that, I mean, perhaps it's an alleyway and the rest of the people who don't get a view of that alleyway may not care as much, but I think that everybody who lives on the block and enjoys the open space of their rear yards, views out their windows, is going to be significantly affected by the sheer size and all of the windows that, will be looking into everybody's backyard, including mine. So I just wanted to touch on that and give everybody a view. I'll stop sharing. We'll go back to, so in terms of, so I'll get to my question now. So the 11 units question is interesting. I don't quite understand what the logic is that, hey, we want to do this because we want to make money and that's the only way we make money. And it's too hard to do it without doing 11 units. Okay, we'll do that math before you buy the property, right? It's not on us to help you do your research. And then looking at the history of LaJoy Park, I know there was a condo on 531T that was developed sometime in the 90s, early 2000s. It's the big yellow building. It has 11 units in it. But there's some pretty stark differences between that lot and that building and what's being proposed in the lot that we have here. 531T is more than twice the size in lot than 421T. It's something like 16,000 square feet in lot size. And this at most, even with the combined lot, which we haven't really gotten into, they want to combine lots. So that's another issue. But even if you say the combined lot size, 531T is more than twice as large. There's an alleyway and a driveway that separates that house from the adjacent house. So it's like a basically entirely separate building. So they have parking that's separate. They have trash that can drive up their alleyway and pull trash out from there, and they're not really bothering anybody else. There was also, I think Bill mentioned, the 1922 3rd Street at one point in the 2010 tried to build an 11-unit apartment, and that was ultimately denied, and the property was subsequently sold. But I guess my question is, even if we ignore the differences about square footage, of the size of the lot, if we use 531T as a model of what's allowed and what's okay, that's twice as large and has 11 units. So you would think the math would work out to be, okay, an appropriate amount of units might be 5 on the size of this lot, or maybe 6. if you take the square footage of all 3 lots, assuming the combination could be approved. So, why should you be given such a large form of relief from the zoning rules, despite the history of LaJoy Park and previous approved developments having so many fewer units per square foot than what you're proposing? So I don't know which one of the 3 on the team wants to address that, but against, what is it that makes you special then, to have an unprecedented amount of units per square foot?
Hi, so this is Ron Schneck, Square 134 Architects. Real quick, I sort of just specifically in response to the sort of the scale of the addition, I think that while I understand that it may sort of seem large compared to a lot of the other buildings along T Street, but I think the discussions that we had, and this goes sort of back to Bill's question a little bit, I think, when we started talking with Brandon, obviously the context, the greater context is of great importance, but the scale in this particular case, it's a pretty big house, it's a very large house, and that the scale of the addition, we still believe is, de minimis to the point that it is deferential to the existing house. And so it's a little difficult. It's a sort of hard thing to compare it to, there's 2 things to compare it to, right? You can compare it to the existing house, or you can compare it to the context, and the immediate context has slightly smaller scale buildings. And so that sort of, again, it wasn't arbitrary. It was sort of through discussions with HP, but I think that's sort of our perspective, is that, it's not that much of a large addition, and then in terms of, unit density, I think I'll let sort of maybe Marty touch on a little bit, if that's okay. I'll unmute.
Sure. I mean, that's a fair question, the due diligence question, if you will, on, if you didn't want to, if you couldn't do 8 units, then don't buy it. But everybody was faced with that question, and the selling price was the selling price, and everybody deals with that situation as it is. And regarding views, of course, I assume I'm not an HPRB expert. I don't know what they say about it. As far as the BZA is concerned, they're generally not concerned with views. That's not part of their consideration. And the massing is at 40%. The massing is much less than every other house on the block. So, and I'm not sure what the difference is between the 8 units and 11 units, and what that impact, maybe you could talk about your concern in that aspect. Because as we mentioned, it might be the same number of bedrooms anyway. So it's not, I don't know, Chris, if you have anything to add. I mean, it's not a question of we think we're so special and it's totally unprecedented. We think it's unprecedented because nobody's dared to try to provide so many inclusionary zoning units, for one. And it does make it more difficult to do that. It is a hit, as Joel mentioned. It's a hit on the profitability of it, and profitability goes hand in hand with being able to do it. And the building could sit there and be further neglected, or somebody could take the initiative and the risk, the tremendous risk, in trying to make something out of it, and that takes some doing, and it's a concern. And so and this is where the developers have believed that they need to be comfortable that they can do the highest quality project they can do.
Thank you. I really appreciate those responses to both of you. I guess my concern with the number of units is it's twofold. Well, there's one thing I want to address first. I know that the baseline math they seem to be making is 8 units is matter of right. That is not entirely true because the subdivision and combination of the lots would first have to be approved, which would then get them to 7,870 square feet on the total lot, divided by 900 would be 8. But the main lot where the existing house already exists is only, I think, about 5,400 square feet, divided by 900 square feet. That's 5 units. So matter of right without any, which isn't even matter of right because you need to convert to multifamily dwelling. So we'll agree to disagree on what the choice is. Is it 8 or 11 or is it 5 or 11? In my mind,
Okay.
it's 5 or 11.
I have one point on that. Right now, lot 804 and 805 are one record lot 13. So that's a developable record lot as it is. So really, we're just adding lot 807 to that, which is about 12, 13%. So it's an increase in the size of the lot of about 12% to add lot 807 to that existing record lot 13. So it's
Sure,
currently
I
a
mean-
7,000 square foot lot.
Right, and you know, alley lots have different rules and they're more strict than residential
alley
lots.
lot.
Yeah, no, not 807. 805 is an alley lot.
Yeah, no, neither one of them is an alley lot.
Okay,
What I'm saying.
I'll take your
It's
word on it.
it's a tax lot, and that's, I mean, but it's, I mean, that's just a technical term. It's part of lot 13, which is a street-facing lot.
Okay, my understanding was that that was an alley lot.
Yes,
and there are different
let
rules,
me
so,
just
but-
interject here and just say, just for clarity, so we can move on.
Yeah.
That's a zoning issue that needs to
Oh.
be addressed by the zoning administrator. I've already had contact with one of the residents who I had a meeting with, and he's addressing that directly with Matt LeGrant. So that's not an ANC issue. We don't determine whether lots are combined or not. So
Okay.
I don't even want to get into that tonight. That's an
Okay.
issue that will be resolved once Matt decides what's going on, and that's between him and the developer team, not with people that own it. Not
Is there a different forum in which the community should be involved in that discussion, Patrick?
That issue will be addressed if it needs to be at the BZA, but it should be resolved based on the email exchange that I have seen from Matt LeGrant and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the person that I'm getting too old for this. He lives right across the street from it, and I had a conference Zoom call with him and another resident. We addressed that, and he's already got Matt looking into it, and it's an issue of whether it's a tax record or not a tax record. And like I said, that's not something that we at the ANC need to be worried about. We have to take some things for granted that they're in ownership of those lots and it's legal. If it's not, that'll be something that has to be decided through zoning.
That's a helpful clarification. I just wanted to make sure that everybody who's attending this meeting knows what their options are for like taking part in that part of the conversation if it doesn't happen here. So for the record, can you just sort of explain who Matt LeGrant is?
That is something that Matt LeGrant is in the zoning office. I don't know what his official title is.
He is the zoning administrator.
That's what I thought, is zoning administrator.
Thanks, Joel.
I did send to, at the request of a couple of members, some direct information on contacting BZA and HPRB. And I also sent Anita the same information so she could blast it out on her listserv for anyone that's registered within the Leroy Park. Any resident has the option to send in comments to HPRB on this project directly, and they will be taken and read. They do that, I know for a fact. And they also have the chance of putting in testimony or comments to BZA directly. And they also have the opportunity to participate at both HPRB's hearing and at the BZA hearing. So they have multiple avenues to still talk to those people that will be making the final decisions on Walk Whistle.
That's
Mr.
very
Nelson,
helpful.
can
Thank you.
I clarify one thing, please, sir?
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify. So the just because it often doesn't get documented, but the lot. sort of consolidation in this point is also part of the HPRB review. So that approval is required for those lots to be consolidated. And although we didn't necessarily bring it up, but it will, when the HPRB order is written, it will be addressing the lot consolidation as well. So just sort of understanding that that process takes place through the HPRB conceptual design review. So I just wanted to make that
The only
clear.
point that I just wanted to make for clarification is that that's not something that we address specifically. Our request from HPRB is to review the design and concept of the project and weigh in on textures and windows and all that kind of stuff, because that's where we have a say. We don't have any say as the ANC to say, you should approve the lot consolidations. That's above our pay grade, so to speak.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. I won't bring it. We'll move on.
If I could add one thing
Sure.
to that, sorry, that rear lot, that 807, there is no development actually occurring on that lot. Like, it's currently being used as parking and it's intended to stay as parking. I mean, those 3 lots are already being utilized on that site currently. I understand that the subdivision still does need to take place, but the lots are being used together already.
And I would add that the addition of that space doesn't alter, I think, tell me if I'm talking out of school here, Emily, but it doesn't alter HPO's or HPRB's view of the compatibility of the addition with the main structure.
Right, I don't believe it does. I mean, as we've been talking with Brendan about everything, they were very explicit to say that if they weren't satisfied with the proposed addition or massing, that they would let us know and would not suggest approval of consolidating the lots. But based on the conversations we've had, we're under the understanding that they are happy with the proposed addition and believe the massing is in line with everything and do intend to consolidate the lots.
Okay, thank you. I'll just leave it with, so just my concern about the number of units is that, it's already a 7,000 square foot existing house. I would imagine that you could build 5 or 6 units within the already existing house and make a tidy profit, considering rent amounts at $2.5 million purchase price. You're probably paying $12,000 a month. 5 units would probably get you $2,500 per unit. You would still make money, and the math, I think, supports it. I'm not a developer, so I guess I don't see the addition seems to be entirely in excess. Why go to 11? Why not just renovate the existing house and you can still make a good amount of money?
Am I permitted, Patrick, to ask a follow-up question?
Certainly.
Okay. So I'm curious for you personally, sir, how you feel about IZ in the building next door, because my excitement around this project is around the potential to add so many IZ units in LaDroit Park in one project. And if they built just 5 or 6 units, there wouldn't be. It would be, well, I guess there'd be an IZ unit at unit 4. They wouldn't bother to build unit 6. You'd get 1 IZ unit. Is there any room in your calculus for the greater good of the community for creating 60% median income IZ units?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my concern is quadrupling the density of the lot and how it'll affect the neighborhood. I mean, if they're truly generous, they could make very low income, give them away or whatever. Maybe it's not feasible, but they also say, oh, hey, we're giving you the 4th IZ unit. Most people wouldn't do that. And now there's an argument to say, oh, if we were going to do 5, we wouldn't include that other IZ unit. So which is it? Are you being generous with your IZ units or not? So even at 6 units, I think you get 3. You could have 2 IZ units, and that would still add 2 to that doesn't exist. I don't have any problems with IZ units. It's just the number of people and the size of the addition that are my main concerns.
Okay.
alley, it's a lot of people, right?
Can
I think
add a
one of the things we
follow-up
look at in
here?
this committee are some of these trade-offs.
Okay.
So that is
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Can I add something to that though? So there's two questions at play here. Even if we were to reduce the number of units, we would still be keeping the massing the same. And it would still be the same, if not more, bedrooms. And, you know, with the proximity to Howard University, I think those units would end up becoming more group units or student housing. And you could actually end up with even more people living in that building with less units.
Yeah.
Why would the massing stay the same, Emily?
The massing, I mean, we're requesting that massing because it's within the 60% lot occupancy. We're at 41.6% lot occupancy. So we're not asking to reduce the size of the massing just by reducing the number of units.
I see.
Well, the only point that I would make as an argument to that, Emily, is that from my perspective, as how I reviewed this, I mean, there is the valid argument about the 11 versus the 6, whether or not you want to have 4 IZ units or 2 IZ units. But I do have an issue if the 6 units are not acceptable to the developer and you still want to build and do only 8 units or 7, if that's what the BZA requests, then there would be some argument to not support the height difference. I mean, that is, to me, that's an HPRB issue that is being pushed on this project because they want it. What we have to keep in mind here is HPRB only makes recommendations. So they will testify in front of the BZA board, but that doesn't mean that the BZA board is going to take everything they say as granted. And the BZA board is following the rules that have been put into the code. So if the code says you can't go over 35 feet and HPRB says, well, we like it to go to 40 because it looks nice and it all connects and all that kind of fuzzy wuzzies, doesn't mean the BZA is going to accept that. They may say you can put the addition on, but you got to do it to 35 feet. And if you have to lose a floor to make your floors match, all that stuff, then you will have to do that. And that would decrease the massing and height in the back of it. So there's some fantasies as to how this is looked at from both HPRB's view and BZA. And I just think it's important to understand and keep in focus that HPRB only is giving recommendations. They don't make the final decision to say, you can construct this. Because HPRB can say they like it. And then it'll go to BZA and they say, too bad, we're not letting you do a 42-foot building.
42%.
If I can jump in here to follow on that. I mean, HPRB always makes their recommendations irrelevant of what zoning is. That's why on this and several other cases that have come before us like this, I've always pushed that we get the zoning approvals first and then you build within that envelope, because BZA is much less flexible with HPRB recommendations than HPRB is with BZA requirements. So that's why I think the zoning issues on this need to be resolved before we can really approve. I mean, I wouldn't support a 40-foot height without knowing what BZA is going to say for number of units and those kind of issues. Just comment.
We generally always go to HPRB before we go to BZA, because the BZA would like to know that they're dealing with something that HPRB has already given their conceptual approval to, rather than going through the whole BZA process and finding, guess what, HPRB won't let you build it anyway. So you kind of wasted your time. But I understand your point. I mean, it's not, one has to go before the other, and it seems in most cases it just works out that it makes more sense to go to HPRB before the BZA. And we do take that risk. If we go to BZA and BZA says they don't like that, then there'd have to be some further discussion with HPRB. And it's not just the design issue. of the massing, it's the flooring issue too. And again, we're asking, the applicant is asking. I know it's a common response to say, well, why not just not ask? Why not just not buy the building or deal with the building as it is? But the developer thinks he's putting forth a quality project, believes in it. So,
And yeah, I'll follow up on that, Marty. Actually, to Commissioner Starkey's comment recently, there are trade-offs, and so I think I alluded to it earlier, where the production of market and affordable rate housing is not just about economics. It actually is about attempting and trying, and so many in the development community, not in the development community, simply just don't even put forth the application or to try. Because there's just a lot of discouragement, there's a lot of disincentive, one from a financial standpoint, but also just because historic considerations and neighbor considerations where affordable housing, specifically in neighborhoods like LaDroit Park that have a high amenity value, they aren't produced. And so, our team and what's being offered at the apartment, we just believe that it has merit and it should be pursued and have a commentary from the ANC, the community, as well as the BZA, which is under Office of Planning, where the desire to go forward with this project is because there has been an ask from the Office of Planning for additional density, additional affordable housing in areas near mass transit. And that's where 421 T Street is. Grocery stores, ability to take metro, buses, access to jobs. And so that is a very significant consideration of this project. And as far as neighborhood commentary, we welcome it because we truly are trying to deliver something that the LaDroit Park neighborhood and the ANC can be proud of, not just because of how aesthetically pleasing it looks, but also because it's bringing affordable units to an area where there aren't many.
Okay, let's move on to our.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
We're kind of getting stuck here. Let's move
Thank
on
you for
to
sharing.
I appreciate, Christopher, what you just said. I should let the record show that I am not an ANC commissioner. I am just a resident of the community serving in a volunteer role on an advisory committee.
Well, thank you for your comment all the same.
I'd just like
Thank
to
you.
jump in. I thank you for your letter. It was very detailed and thought out. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for giving me the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next.
Okay, so we will have David Reyna. Let's see if he is still on. David. All right. David, I'm going to ask you to start your video here, and then you'll come on the screen. Okay, and please introduce yourself whenever you're able.
Hi, I'm Dave Reyna, my wife, Becky. You guys see us?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead.
We live at 406 East Street. So we're right behind 421 and 1 over. Our main house lot is connected to that big parking alley lot, which we own as well. The truth is, I think we're actually quite excited that this house, which has been beautiful house, which has been neglected for so long, the entire period of previous ownership, was being purchased and frankly being developed as something more than it was, which is the the 2 or the 3 unit sort of informal apartment house that it was, because it can be so much more, just sort of innately. And frankly, to speak to I think what Melanie said and some other folks on the panel, we're actually kind of excited about the inclusionary zoning. We're happy that the code actually requires inclusionary zoning to get above a certain number of units. At the beginning of this process, in some respects, we were more excited because what we had understood from a very brief conversation that I had with Chris in the alleyway where his family was there, my kids were playing ball in the alley. We talked for a moment, he introduced himself as the and what he had said to others is that the inclusionary zoning units were going to be family size. And from what we understand about the city and inclusionary zoning and people who need inclusionary zoning, which is in part because our kids go to a local public elementary school here, there is such a deficit of family size inclusionary zoning units. And we were excited about this. And so we absolutely have problems with the scale of this project. But to hear people involved in the development committee, first of all, that if they get what they want, we're talking about 4 one-bedroom inclusionary zoning units, which are the smallest, aside from a studio. They're not family size. They're just the bare minimum inclusionary zoning units. But then to hear other people on the committee say, if they don't get what they want, there's a chance that this is going to turn into like student housing and all this other stuff. That feels kind of threatening, to be completely honest. I don't think that's a very collaborative way of approaching this process. And frankly, this is a process that's just starting because this is the first bit of input that we're going to get. So I would just say, no matter where we end up at 6 or 8 or 11, it would mean, I think, a lot to me and I think to a lot of people in this community to know that the inclusionary zoning units are going to really be family size units, because that's what we need. So all of that aside, I'm sorry, Patrick, you said no soapboxes and there it was. I apologize. All of that.
Let me just interrupt you just for 1 second, so you understand from the ANC's standpoint. The point that you're making is one that both myself and Tony Norman have been staunch advocates of family units, and this is not, from my viewpoint, not a finished, completed thing. The ANC, and this is part of what the ANC is put in place for. When we make our recommendation, if it is to support or not the project to that, we have the ability to request certain things of the developers. And that would be specifically, at least from my perspective, that I would request from the developer. You're doing IZ units, we don't want 1 bedrooms. If you need to reduce it to 2 units because you need to do bigger, whatever, we want family size units, because that's the shortfall in this city. And that's an ongoing issue that we here at the ANC have been arguing for years, it seems like. So from the standpoint of that, you're right on target, and the ANC is 100% behind that idea, and that will be part of our recommendation when and if it goes to the BZA board.
Okay.
And
if I may chime in on that, Patrick, this is more for the ANC. For the last 3 years, the company has been solely dedicated to trying to create family-sized units in Washington, D.C. And so the claim and the desire for ANC members and neighbors to want to see affordable housing is shared from individuals like myself and companies like ours that are looking to do that. It truly is a challenge to put it all together. That's not an excuse. It is the truth. And I think with 421, being able to create affordable units and affordable units for families, we just mentioned that in RF zones, they had not been created in 4 years. There's been only 1. And so even if it was of a family size, it was still only 1. And so this 421 T Street project is not perfect. We would like to have 3 and 4 bedroom units throughout, but that would require additional density. It would require a historic property that would be able to be changed, So we do work in parameters where we have to deal with the footprint that we're in. We have to keep it to a certain scale. And so to David's point, if we could, in a perfect world, have 10 units, all 3 bedroom, 3 bath, that's exactly what we would do. But the footprint doesn't allow for it. And the historic considerations that we've been talking about this evening also don't allow for it. The decision was made to try and provide the most affordable units that we could in a mixed income project, and that was 4. And what we did to supplement that, because they weren't large 2 and 3 bedroom units, we have on-site childcare for all of the units. We have nanny storage for all of the units, and that means that somebody who is making $45,000 a year will not just rent this apartment and enjoy the light and the air, but they'll also have access to childcare services that in another building they would not. And so again, it isn't the largest space in the world. However, we are really trying to provide services for families. That's what our immediate space is.
There's no point in providing family services to apartments that aren't big enough to have families in them.
Yeah, I was just going to make the same point. I mean, you don't have a family in a 1-bedroom unit, and all your IZ units are 1-bedrooms.
So in any event, I don't want to sidetrack us. That was my, like I said, that was my soapbox. I really want to focus in because aside from what I just said, the size of this extension is frightening to us. It is, we feel like it is inconsistent with the architectural aspects of the community. We think from a services perspective, taking a house that had like 2 units, you know, maybe it had 3 units, but at any one time there were only 2 units occupied, and going up to 11 units, particularly everything that's going to be serviced off of that alley. And by the way, like the trash thing, being in the back of the backyard as far away from your house, but basically in the backyard of a neighbor. And the idea of a trash truck having to back into the alley twice, 3 times a week, early in the morning, turn around, all of our bedrooms are on the rear of our houses. We're going to be listening to that. Or having the trash bins rolled down 165-foot alley. I know it says it's 10 feet wide. It's actually 8 feet 1 inch wide at its narrowest because there's a poorly placed telephone pole. But in any event, all of those things really matter to the livability of our houses and where we lived for a very long time in a place that we care about. So,
and would to the potential residents of the development
as well, exactly. And so I guess what I'm really just struggling with.
Could you restate Becky's point? She wasn't audible.
Same considerations would be true of anyone that lived in this potential.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all.
I can't hear what she's saying.
Maybe he can restate it for you.
These are not just concerns for us. These would be concerns of people who live in the new development as well, right? It would affect the sort of the quality of their lives. But in any event, to be specific, my question is this. The statement was made that there have been no variances or very few variances related to the 900 square foot density. I spent a fair amount of time reading cases before the BZA, and there have been grants of that variance, but they've always been for existing situations where no new construction is proposed. It's to allow a sort of long-standing non-conforming use be brought into technical compliance. So for instance, a house that has been used as 3 units in an RF1 zone for the past 15 or 20 years. The owner goes to do a renovation. In order to get a certificate of occupancy, they now have to come get a variance to the 900 square foot rule because they have a small lot. And the board says, well, we could deny you this request. Now you have to kick somebody out who lives in your house. We're not going to do that. That's a practical difficulty. I'm just struggling with this project where no matter what, you could get denied everything and you can still double, at least double, maybe triple the number of units that currently exist. What is specifically, and maybe this is a question for the lawyer, what is specifically the practical difficulty we're trying to avoid, other than you have chosen to try to build a project that is larger than what the density limitation allows?
Sure, and remember, practical difficulty, if you did that research, first of all, I'll say that the case that you talk about is what I call the estoppel type case, where there's already 3 units. And yes, that is one of the cases that's approved. Another type of case you would find is one where there's either structural issues or a unique property that might be a challenge to restore or renovate. And there's been additions proposed with those, and I've done a few of those myself. They're not granted often. You might find there haven't been any in a while, in a few years, but you might find one every couple of years there for a while prior to 2015. Regarding the practical difficulty, of course, the practical difficulty means not that it's impossible to do the project, but that it's unnecessarily burdensome without the relief. And so our argument is, it doesn't hit you over the head. It is rather nuanced, and it has to do with the overall design of the building and challenges in restoring a large building. And few people would take that risk. It's easy to sit back and say, just don't do it. or just do it single family, and you see that doesn't happen with buildings a lot of times like this. There, okay, Bill, but you didn't buy this one, and nobody else did, to develop it as a single family. So
but it
this
did happen in a situation. So there are precedents for that. But just to clarify,
right, but it didn't happen with this property, and it's always seems rather easy to sit back and say, gosh, why don't you just do this instead? And so it's not, it's unnecessarily burdensome, is our argument. It's not, again, the practical difficulty isn't that just it's impossible to do without the relief.
And if I could just add to it, there's also physical limitations with the existing structure. I mean, by today's standards, if I was able to, like, I'm not saying I want to do this, but if I was to wipe the lot clean, I could build something in a rectangle much more efficient. I'm not wanting to do that. But within the existing structure itself, you can really only fit about 5 units. And for the amount in terms of construction costs, renovations to build that building and bring it to that upkeep that you need, you really do need a good amount of new construction to facilitate or offset that ability to practically build the, well, not build, but renovate the original structure to the quality you want.
No, I realize that it's not a perfect parallel because this is a development project, a commercial development project, and I'm a private homeowner. But we did a very large renovation where we added a unit to our house. And I think of the 15 people who are going to talk after me, 10 of them probably have done something similar. The argument of financially this works or doesn't work just falls on deaf ears. Like I just don't buy it. If that were the case, you'd have one of two types of development. We'd have one unit single family homes, and we'd have massive apartments. And frankly, I don't think you have, and I don't think you will provide anybody here with a financial pro forma showing what it is that you're going to do. I mean, there was a lengthy explanation in the application you submitted to the BZA about, it was the longest part of the submission. It was 7 pages of straw men of, well, then we'd have to do this, but that wouldn't work. And maybe this. Just, sorry, I just don't buy it. Like, this is one of the hottest neighborhoods in LaJoy Park. People buy buildings, houses like crazy here. It's a huge market. You can find a way to make 6 or 8 units work. I know you can do it.
Okay. Unless you have anything else, David.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
To the next person. We're kind of getting close to our normal time when we end our meeting, so I don't want to go into midnight trying to get answers. I want to be able to talk to whoever wants to talk. So.
Thank you for your comments, David. And next we'll have Cindy Palandines, and I believe she's still on here. Amazing. And I will call her up here. Thanks, Cindy. I think I see you on. If you're able to share your video, great. If not, awesome. Yep. All right. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry. I see that my questions that I had in the box are no longer visible. Chayton and Dave have raised a lot of the questions that I had, and I know that there's people that are coming forward that would also have some good questions to raise. So I want to give them that opportunity, including my neighbor, Matt Fay, who has presented to the subcommittee for your consideration a petition with about 65 households, I think, represented, that just basically affirms the community's interest in maintaining the historic features of the neighborhood and responsible development of any properties, as Dave and Chayton both touched on. But my questions, I'm on the alley, so I'm on an alley lot. I'm at 409 T Street, and some of my neighbors weren't able to participate using Zoom, so I wanted to air some of the questions that they had raised with me in person. My house is on the alley, and as Dave mentioned, that alley is 165 feet long, so it's quite long, but it's also quite narrow. And one of my neighbors in particular Her house sits on the narrowest part of the alley, as does mine. And she is disabled and, you know, uses the alley to unload her groceries. So she, like me and like several of us, we feel that a project of the size and scope that's being proposed would, you know, negatively impinge on our ability to access and use the alley. So it's very difficult once you're down the alley to turn around. You essentially have to turn around on Dave's lot, which is private, and he has, you know, every right to close off that access. So, you know, just more questions about the alley usage. And just to affirm, I think Melanie had raised this issue previously, you know, how would the development affect alley use? I think myself and several neighbors on the alley think that it would be negatively affected. There's also a question about water use. So the size of the proposed structure is quite big. Even permeable pavers collect water, and there would be questions of water runoff and usage. Obviously, we all know that we're all paying for a large northeast boundary tunnel system that's like a $1.5 billion project that is only a few blocks away, the endpoint of that tunnel. So flooding is an issue in LaDroit Park. It's been an issue in my home, just a few doors down from the development. So how have the proposal, the development group tried to understand the impact on water runoff and sewage of the development? Thanks.
If I may, just a little bit, we will be working with a civil engineer and a mechanical engineer. In terms of water runoff calculations, we have to make sure that the water is retained on site. That's a standard requirement of any development project, and anything after it's collected on site has to go through a sewer directly into this water main or sewer main. So it's not going to be something where water would be left to go into the alley or run off in other locations.
Because the house is elevated from the alley, so I've had erosion in my backyard that goes to the east. So that would suggest to me that there would be water runoff along the alley. And also, I wanted to mention that, you know, 4th Street is already a street that Anita knows very well, has a lot of traffic. It would be very difficult for a trash truck to stop midway through that street to go down the alley. It would also be very difficult. It's a blind alley, so as you're exiting, it's very difficult to see oncoming traffic. So, you know, to put more vehicles on the alley would obviously increase those factors by, you know, a factor of 5 or 10, depending on the size of the eventual proposal.
Just to sort of reiterate what Emily said, so right now there is probably water coming off of the property into the alley and onto neighboring properties, but I mean, the current stormwater management requirements, we will be making sure all of that water that hits the site we take care of. There's no exception to that. The trash, yes, I think, you know, we'll get a plan from Tenley Town Trash that will give a little bit more specific information. I think in general, you know, we're not proposing anything that I feel is that exceptional to other, you know, neighborhoods throughout the city. But we do understand your concerns, and I think, you know, when we submit a plan, maybe that'll help clarify a little bit about how the trash is going to work.
I mean,
to follow that up, Cindy.
Go ahead.
Cindy, to your point, I think one of the things that hasn't been touched on quite yet, once, you know, this development goes forward, regardless of the unit count, these will be, the people living in the building will be neighbors. And so any issues that are happening in the alleyway, whether caused by the property or caused by another neighboring owner, everybody will be in the alley together. So we don't want excess disruption in the alleyway. We want to be able to hear from, and that's what makes these meetings so productive, is we get to hear directly about concerns that neighbors have, but the concerns oftentimes are similar to what the development team is looking to do, because we're concerned about the people who will be living there. And so hearing things about stormwater management, even though we're already taking care of that for the site, it's something that we can now add and make sure that we can communicate and get back to you as we continue to progress.
Okay, and also I think it's unclear. I mean, a structure of the size site would have a lot of AC compressors, for instance, which would also cause noise along the alley. I'm sure that all of these things are being taken into account, but considering that you want to nearly quadruple the size of the original site, the non-conforming unit size, obviously all those factors, it would be great to have them taken into account. So thank you.
We've actually already been working with the mechanical engineer to develop a proposed mechanical system. And we're actually doing a VRF system, which only requires one external condenser. And we purposefully tucked it in a location to be hidden between the proposed addition and the original roof to have it as unobstructed from the neighbors and visible from the street.
Thanks, Cindy.
Can someone tell me what the trash collection points are for the other properties that are that have rear entry onto the alley?
I would assume that they're all from the alley. I don't, that's a good question. I would almost 90% say it's more likely in the alley, because they're not gonna let people put trash cans on the street.
Patrick, no, it's on T Street. All trash collections on the front of the properties.
What about U Street, Joel?
I don't know U Street, but I think most of Detroit Park is twice a day on the front of the house, because the alleys are so small.
Anita, do you know? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, unmute yourself.
I think it's in the front on U Street.
Okay.
On the front. Okay, thank you.
But then this would be the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I see. And then one other question. There are currently 3 parking spaces at the rear of this property, and it would go from 3 to 5 parking spaces. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, next person.
Yes, so I am going to go a little out of order, just given the time, because I know that Matt Fay and Jake.
Can I just ask a quick question? How many more people do we have here? Because we're getting to almost 8.
So we have, we still have quite a few people who would like to discuss, but I think I do know that Matt and Jason have sent specific petition and map, and hopefully
Matt and Jason know we're going to want to ask questions. So I will just restate again, please make sure that you ask a question. I know that you want to talk about the issues, but we've pretty much summed up, from what I can tell, a lot of the issues that we need to. And I just don't want this meeting to run, we're already at 8:30 and we normally end at 9. We could go a little longer than that because we're not in an office, but I'm sure nobody wants to sit on a Zoom meeting until 12 o'clock midnight.
Yes, and I actually will urge folks who did ask questions, if you have things that were not raised or are not raised by Jason and Matt in the next few minutes, please put your support or your new question in the Q&A, and I can quickly read those off later or during the discussion. But just feel free to.
And I also just want to say I don't want to have anyone to get the impression that I'm not giving anyone a chance to talk. I don't even have a problem if you just get on and say, I concur with all the people that said what they said before and I just want to be heard. That's fine too, but we just can't have a whole lot of people getting on and going on and on and on and on, because we're getting, at some point I'm just gonna have to cut this off because we have to move on.
Are cocktails allowed online?
Say that again?
Are cocktails allowed online?
Certainly, as long as you don't go too much.
Great. Well, we have Matt and Jason on